Thanks for joining me. My name's Tim Rajeff, and this knucklehead to my left is Tom Larimer. And we decided to come out on the river, the Clackamas River, because close to Portland, Oregon, it's one of the areas where people have been fishing shorter rods. And Airflo has a new fly line, the Skagit Switch Head, that Tom was one of the key designers of. And in the world of two-handed stuff in our world, these Skagit Switch Heads are actually being used on regular spey rods. So since Tom's the man here with the rod, I thought I'd turn it over, and Tom's going to take you through why the Airflo line was designed, what it does that other lines don't do, and also maybe show you a tip or two on how to cast and fish these heads.
The Skagit Switch comes from 540 grains all the way down to 360 grains. This is in 30 grain increments, so you can tune your rod to your exact casting stroke. One of the things you'll notice about all of our shooting heads is that they're now packaged without a spool and in one of these heavy-duty Ziploc bags. We did this for two reasons. Number one, it's a lot better for the environment, not wasting spools, but more importantly, this bag integrates into our Airflo head wallet, which is a great way to keep all of your equipment organized. So looking at the shooting head, a couple of features you want to be aware of. Number one, we used heavy-duty loops on both the front and the back to give you years of durability. The loop in the back, or the loop that goes to the shooting head, is black, and that gives you a visual break between your shooting line and your shooting head, and so you always want to make sure that the black is in the back. On the front loop, you'll notice that we've continued to use our color-coded system like we've used in the past, but now we actually have a printed version, so it gives you not only what the line model is, but it also gives you the grain weight, so you always know that you have the right head on your rod. So like all of our fly lines at Airflo, our shooting heads are made out of polyurethane. Polyurethane is a great material because it's much more durable than PVC, it doesn't dry out, and it's a better process for the environment in production. We also have built all of our shooting heads on a low stretch 6% core, which gives you better loop stability while casting, but more importantly, you can feel every little thing that's going on with your fly under the surface. So when that steelhead comes up and just gives you that really soft tug, you know it's a fish and not a rock. So once you've got your head, all you need to do is loop on one of our sink tips and head for the river. We designed the Skagit Switch for sink tip fishing with switch rods. In the past, people would show up on my boat on a guide trip with a switch rod, and they'd be all excited because they just bought this new rod, they got their new line, and it was very difficult for them to make the cast with it. And one of the reasons is that a switch rod by nature has a taper that allows you to both cast with two hands or single hands. So it tends to be more of a traditional taper, maybe like your 5-weight. With that, it was very hard to keep a sustained load on the rod, which is the sweet feel that you feel when you spey cast. So by the taper design of this line, we were able to essentially slow the rod down, which gives you a much smoother, slower stroke. You don't have to feel like you're so punchy with it like in the past, and it feels natural and it feels fun, most importantly. The front taper gives you all the power to turn over your biggest sink tips and your heaviest flies. So it's a great line for, you know, not only your switch rods, but if you like to cast longer rods with shorter heads, it'll do that great too. So I'd like to talk to you today a little bit about both casting and fishing these Skagit switch lines. So one of the things to keep in mind is that the shorter the line and the shorter the rod becomes, the more compact your stroke needs to be. And by that I mean, if you think about, you've got an imaginary box in front of you. It's as wide as your shoulders, up to your eyes, and down to your belly button. That's where your casting stroke should be, right inside of that box. And you'll notice that my top hand is in line with my shoulder and my elbow. My bottom hand is in line with my zipper. So as that elbow starts to come outside of the box, you open the casting stroke up, and with these shorter heads, it's going to do nothing but hurt you. So keep that in mind as you're casting. The next thing I want you to think about is using your bottom hand to drive the rod. So from everything from, you know, setting up your anchor, to driving your D-loop behind you, to the forward cast, think about the bottom hand driving the rod tip. The top hand is really just a pivot, and a great way to sort of, you know, get yourself into that mindset is just hold the rod really light, even with just a couple fingers in your thumb, and just let that bottom hand do all the work for you. That's going to really help you with these shorter rods as well. The last thing I want you to think about is just staying nice and slow in your D-loop. You know, these heads are only 20.5 feet long, and if you come around on a really fast, hard D-loop, like you're probably used to using on a longer line, which most of us learned on, you're just going to rip your anchor out. One of the real big benefits of this line is the back taper of it. We used a very big diameter on the back taper of the line to give you a little bit more load, to essentially slow that rod down for you, so you don't have to use all that line speed behind you to get the rod to load. And that's one of the magic things about this line. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about actually fishing these lines and a couple of things that I love about these heads. The biggest advantage really is the fact that you can make an extremely small D-loop in the smallest, tightest spots. And you know, as the rivers get busier and there's more people out here steelhead fishing, oftentimes these big classic runs like we've got in front of us here, you know, there's people fishing them. So you end up fishing smaller spots, a little bit more out of the way spots, and those spots a lot of times have very limited backcasting room. So the Skagit Switch really lets you set your cast up, make a nice slow D-loop, and still get a nice fishing cast out there. You can see I didn't work hard at that at all. It's a really easy cast. Now, if I do want to get a little bit more speed, a little bit more distance, if you will, I can use a little bit more overhang. In other words, the amount of shooting line out the rod tip between the rod tip and the head. And that will allow me to use a little bit more line speed. So when I'm out in those runs where I've got a little bit more room to move, I can make a little longer cast and put a little bit more speed behind me. So once the fly hits the water, that's where I really, really love these heads. You know, this is a short head, and when it hits the water out there and I set my men, because it's so short, it really rides in a lot less current than longer heads. So I set my men, get my fly sinking, bring my fly into tension, and by just lifting my rod tip over the currents between me and my fly, I can really slow that fly down. I can get control over it, which is my big thing, and I can steer the head through the currents. So it's a great head, not only from a casting perspective, but from a fishing perspective as well.
Tom, you sure make that look easy. Well, I hope you've had a chance to learn a little bit about the Airflo Skagit Switch heads. And grab your stick, hit the water, and have some fun out there.